DFS. It is Friday, January 20th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our DFS drafting podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. It is the Friday before Divisional Round weekend of the NFL playoffs. We got 8 teams left. We got 4 teams to go, and we still got drafting to do, Jared. We're on Underdog this week. No drafts on Sleeper. That's been a part of our draft shows that we started doing over the past month and a half or so. But Underdog's still going, not just full playoff drafts. We do have weekly drafts. We still have the Battle Royale, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today, right?
Yeah, and honestly, this is the first short slate Battle Royale I've competed in. So I'm trying to figure it out still too. So I'm looking forward to talking through this today and getting your thoughts on just general strategy for a 4-game drafting slate.
And I was thinking about not donating any money to the slate, but then you made me start thinking about it. And then, of course, I looked at ADP and such, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and donate some money this week after all, because there's only so much longer that we can play, full fantasy football, whatever you define full as, before the season is really done.
Yeah. So starting to think about this, the biggest thing I'm having it's been a challenge for me is you got to get these teams different somehow, but it's much tougher to get different here than it is in DFS, where the salary forces you to pick some guys that aren't studs on your team. And we talked about Richie James as a DFS play this week. You can draft Richie James. I have, trust me, on Underdog. You don't have to. You can fill your team mostly with these studs. So I just think a lot of these teams are going to look the same this week. So every draft I do, I'm trying to figure out at least one way where I think I can differentiate this team from hopefully others and not be competing against the same exact team in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about regular season DFS, one of the challenges of a regular DFS lineup is figuring out how to get different and just, hoping that you get that right. This week, we've talked about this format where you're only picking 6 players. We obviously want to get different, but the challenge might be to not get too different, because you don't have to go far down the ADP list before you're looking at guys that, really need a total outlier of a performance to carry you there. It's much more likely to be, I think, a duplicated lineup, or just a lineup that has nobody truly surprising, but just a small difference that pushes you ahead of the other teams around you.
Yeah, and even as we start looking at ADP here, just how it sets up, Jalen Hurts is very often stacked with AJ Brown. They're in a range where you can get both of them. If you don't get AJ Brown, you can get Devonta Smith. Josh Allen, Steph Diggs. I see that stack in half of these drafts I do. So it's if you're going to start that way, you need to get different elsewhere. Or the other option is take Josh Allen, but then take AJ Brown with him. And then, stack a bill later. Or don't stack a bill at all. I've done some teams where I don't stack my quarterback. And I've done it with Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, or Daniel Jones, who I think, can score enough points with their legs where they can have a big game and not have to have, any one of their pass catchers necessarily have a huge game.
Yeah, and I think if you build around a Bills stack this week, you're obviously not only betting that the Bills are going to go off, but you're also betting that the other teams are not going to go off, because it's such a packed slate that if we have anything like last week, where we started with 3 straight games over 60 points, and I think all but one game had a team reach 31 points, you don't have to have the stack. You don't have to have the right stack to get there. You just have to have all the top scoring players. So looking at quarterbacks, you mentioned Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen up there. I agree that one of the ways to get different is to not stack like usual. Any other ways that you're looking to get different? Because for me, the takeaway from quarterback is all of the quarterbacks are capable of scoring. They showed us that. Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones all got there last week. Trevor Lawrence got there in a bad game. So if you're drafting a bunch of teams, I think you want all of these guys. I think if you're like me and you're not drafting a ton of them, one way to get different is to look past the top shelf guys and just wait on quarterback. And that way you're getting different combos of the earlier round wide receivers.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, there's only 6 teams in these drafts. So 2 of these guys aren't even getting picked in these drafts. And in general, you can get Purdy, Prescott, Jones, or Lawrence with your last pick. So that's the advantage of taking those guys. I think another way to get different is, one way is to not stack your quarterback. Another way is to overstack your quarterback and double stack them. I don't think I triple stack anyone, but I think double stacking. I talked about during the regular season where on Underdog, I don't want to do that too often, just because I think it limits your upside too much in these teams that are so small. They're smaller than DFS lineups. They're more stacked than your DFS lineup. So I think double stacking often doesn't work, but I think on a 4-game slate, it's much more viable. So that's something I've been doing too, is double stacking Allen with Diggs and either Gabe Davis or Dawson Knox, or double stacking Mahomes with Kelsey and Juju, or Kelsey and Jerick McKinnon. So I think that's something to consider too.
And that's certainly a strategy to mix in if you're drafting a bunch of teams as opposed to a go-to, right?
For sure.
On to running back, where Christian McCaffrey is the top guy off the board at any position overall. And it makes sense. Whatever, I talked about concerns on our other DFS show for what could be his downside. That's just relative to everybody else that we're choosing from when salary is in. I don't actually think there's anything wrong, of course, with playing Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, he's my 101 pretty easily this week. And I guess that's partly because I'm a little cooler than consensus on Saquon Barkley. So if you don't believe Saquon Barkley is going to deliver a big game, then it's like McCaffrey and everyone else, which has kind of been my strategy in these. Like if I don't get McCaffrey early, I'm generally not taking any of these, second or third round types, the ETN, the Mixon types. I've mixed in some McKinnon with Mahomes, but otherwise, like I think Pollard, the matchup's bad, but like it's Pollard. He can bust one big play and have a good enough day again, especially on a slate with only 8 games. Then Miles Sanders, who we talked about, Sanders and even Pacheco. I think you mentioned if you're drafting Bills, you're betting on them having a big game and the other offenses not having big games. I'd say you're betting on the Bills passing game having a big game and the other passing games not having a big game. So like on team, like if I draft Allen and I'm stacking the Bills passing game, I like getting Miles Sanders on that team. And you're not saying the Eagles are going to have a bad day. You're just saying Sanders is going to have the biggest day among Eagles. So you can kind of have it both ways, even if you believe both of those offenses do go off this weekend.
Yeah, and just looking at the ADP numbers for folks who might be listening to this instead of watching it, we've got McCaffrey at the top. We've got Barkley right at the end of round 1, the round 1-2 turn in these 6-team drafts. Then more than a round between Barkley and RB3, Travis Etienne. Joe Mixon's close behind him. Jerick McKinnon's close behind Mixon. So less space among those guys. You can see folks are saying, if I don't get McCaffrey, then Barkley. If I don't get Barkley, then I'm waiting. I agree with Miles Sanders with those passing games. I think James Cook is one other guy I want to highlight here because he is both a way to stack with Josh Allen and a late piece that you can get of that Bills offense. Like you could also consider Devin Singletary, who played a lot more than James Cook last week, just looking at sheer snaps. James Cook still carried the ball more than Devin Singletary in that game, did get the touchdown. So I still prefer Cook. I think he's the higher upside player than Devin Singletary, but I think both of those guys are in play as late running backs if you push off that position and then just draft one of them.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say the guys McCaffrey through Sanders. So what is that? That's 7 running backs. Those are the guys that get picked in pretty much every draft. Once you get to Pacheco and the Bills backs and Zeke and Elijah Mitchell, that's when you'll see these guys drafted. I don't know, half the time, maybe not even. It's gross. The one other guy I've been drafting down here is Zeke Elliott. He's going to average like 2.8 yards per carry against this 49ers defense. It's not going to be efficient, but he's still their guy. When they get the ball inside the 5-yard line, Zeke comes in the game. As someone who's, played Pollard quite a bit down the stretch here, trust me, it's Zeke coming in the game when they get near the goal lines. It's really tilting if you're playing Tony Pollard. But so like Zeke, he could have 14 carries for 40 yards, but score 2 touchdowns. And, I think he has more touchdown upside than the Bills backs. He has more touchdown upside than Elijah Mitchell. I think Mitchell has some intriguing touchdown upside, but so that's why, if I need my running back in the 6th round, Zeke's the guy I've been looking to often in that situation.
Can see that. Wide receiver, Jamar Chase is the only one that's in the 1st round every time. Stephon Diggs is right behind him. His ADP is at that 6-7 turn. Then AJ Brown not far behind them. Deebo Samuel 4th, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Smith, Christian Kirk. What have you liked so far? What do you like going forward at wide receiver?
I've been surprised that Chase has kind of separated himself as the clear top receiver on the slate, and that's how we have it in our projections for the week. But to me, Steph Diggs and AJ Brown at least are right there with him. So I like Diggs and Brown as better values among the elite guys. My most drafted guy at any position is T. Higgins.
I knew it before you said it.
Talked about him on the DFS slate. his ADP is actually climbing. It opened the week in like the mid-20s. I was able to get him in like the fourth round quite often. But even here, like, I don't know, behind Gabe Davis, behind Christian Kirk, I'll take T. Higgins straight up over those guys if we're talking about, ultimate ceiling to win something like the Underdog Battle Royale.
And this is the group that I was talking about when I was saying that I don't mind waiting on quarterback. I don't mind waiting on running back either, because then you can mix and match these guys. And, we talked about gaps at the other positions in ADP, but from Jamar Chase down to what we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Gabe Davis is 8. Gabe Davis is right ahead of T. Higgins, by the way, at this point in ADP. And then T. Higgins at 9. So all of those guys are within the first 19.1 slots. That is 3 rounds of 6-team drafting plus, 1 or 2 picks. So all of these guys are going in that range. You're not going to wait and then grab these guys unless you get lucky. In a single draft here or there, you'll see players slide. And I think that can be a good place to take advantage of slides and grab a piece of somebody that you might have passed on otherwise. But I really like mixing and matching from this group. I'll tailor some of it to stacking with quarterbacks if I have them. But again, this week is even less about stacking than usual.
Then even past Higgins, like there's an ADP gap. Higgins at 19.1, then you go down to 25.8 in ADP, and that's Brandon Ayuk, who I think has a ceiling here. Especially, we talked about this Dallas secondary has been banged up and not very good lately. Zay Jones against the Chiefs, should be plenty of passing volume from Jacksonville. We've seen Zay Jones have blow up games, and someone we haven't talked about yet on the DFS show or here, Juju Smith-Schuster, who really seemed to be trending up until he suffered that concussion. And I think he had one big game post-concussion, but then the last few weeks of the season, just invisible. Playing time down a little bit, not many targets. But where he's going in these drafts, like I just because I love the Chiefs offense so much this week, I've been taking quite a bit of Juju because I do think he has, 20-point upside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll certainly give him that upside. I wouldn't overdo him, but getting some exposure to him is a solid idea. Are there any sleepers that you've mixed in? I think this is where you can get yourself in trouble by overthinking it and thinking of somebody that's a little too different. Like Richie James, I wouldn't quite put in the category of too different because he could get a lot of targets in this game, and anybody's capable of putting one in for a touchdown, but he's less likely than, say, Michael Gallup right ahead of him, I think, of having a big game without getting peppered with 10 plus targets.
Yeah, I definitely prefer Hodgins among the Giants receivers in this half PPR format when you do want to be chasing those touchdowns. I think Hodgins has the most touchdown upside. I have drafted some Richie James. I mean, Richie James doesn't get picked in most of these, which is the argument in favor of him. He's probably going to be like 20-25% owned, would be my guess in this contest, whereas Hodgins, well over 50, maybe up to like 75% owned. So you get the ownership thing with James, but those Giants receivers are the ones I like. Gallup's not a bad call. We've talked about how the Niners have not been a tough defense against wide receivers. Gallup doesn't look the same player. They're not using him the same. You look at his average depth of target and his yards per catch, it's way down from where it had been prior to the knee injury. So I worry about his upside a little bit, but as your final round pick, like you said, he could score once or twice. We saw him have a 2 touchdown game this season, so he's definitely someone I'm interested in down there.
Yeah, Gallup is a bad pick, like on his own. But if you're getting down there for your last pick and you need a wide receiver, and we get 45 pass attempts from the Cowboys in a game where they fall behind, then Michael Gallup could just be the guy who gets lucky in the end zone.
Yeah, I think your goal should to not need a wide receiver in the 6th round. And we can get to tight end now too, which for an 8-game slate is like super deep, and only 6 tight ends get drafted. Dawson Knox is the 6th tight end. So to me, now you will have teams take 2 tight ends this week. I've seen it, way more than you would on a normal slate. So if you wait too long, you could get stuck with a Hayden Hurst or a Daniel Bellinger. But for the most part, you can get a quality tight end in the 6th round.
And I like taking 2 tight ends on this slate because the shorter slate makes it make more sense. You said, about the wide receivers. If you start your draft with a quarterback and a running back, for example, if you're picking at that 1-2 turn, you go Saquon Barkley and whatever quarterback gets to you, the wide receivers are not going to be pretty. You might have T. Higgins when it gets back to you, but it's not going to be like, ooh, I love the wide receivers that got back to me. So I like the double tight ends, for that reason, and because it is a really good group at tight end. I also think that we're obviously there's going to be a team in every draft that has Travis Kelce. There's going to be a team in every draft that has Evan Ingram. There's going to be plenty of Kelce Mahomes stacks, maybe not as much of that as some of the other stacks. There's going to be plenty of Evan Ingram and Trevor Lawrence stacks because that's an easy one to build here. I don't think there will be as many Travis Kelce, Evan Ingram stacks. And I think that has the potential of giving you the top receiver for both of those teams in what could be the highest scoring matchup of the weekend. Then even if you don't have either quarterback in that one, you have probably somebody who's absorbing a fair amount of the passing points from the quarterbacks in that game.
Yeah, I like that call for sure. I think I do have a few Kelce Ingram teams. But Dallas Goedert, I think Higgins and Goddard are my two highest owned players right now. I've done 21 of these. To me, Goddard should be the second tight end off the board this week. I prefer him over Ingram a bit just for upside, just in that Eagles offense. And he's the fifth tight end in ADP. So to me, he's a big value.
I like Goddard as well. He's another one that I will take as a 2 tight end lineup. I really like it because, I said about Travis Kelce and Evan Ingram maybe being the top receivers for their team. Dallas Goedert could finish this weekend as the most productive receiver for the Eagles as well.
For sure. And like, again, the 2 tight end thing is popular this week, but I still think that's differentiating yourself. I think it's, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 20% of teams, I would guess, are going to end up with 2 tight ends. So that's still a way to make your lineup different.
Yeah, I would love to know beyond the anecdotal. It's too bad that we can't get a number because I'm sure it happens more often. But like you said, I would still bet that it happens less often.
That's next year for Underdog. Give us ownerships.
That's right. All right. So now we're going to jump into a battle royale draft for Jared here. We'll see exactly how he runs through, exactly what makes to him, and, where he's picking from, which is obviously going to shape some of that. As usual, the drafts get filled up very quickly. It is 6-team drafts. It is half PPR scoring. Really no other wrinkles that you need to account for in there scoring wise.
Right. Not scoring wise. I think just keep in mind it's a top heavy tournament. So you want to be aiming for the top spot. So keep that in mind as you're building.
Top heavy scoring, top heavy prizes, and you need a quarterback, you need 1 running back, you need 2 wide receivers, you need 1 tight end, and then you got 1 flex. So the moment you fill that extra spot, the moment you go beyond what you need for any position, that closes up the flex, takes away some flexibility, but it's not necessarily a bad thing as we run through here. Jared picked the 5th slot out of 6 teams in this draft. Jared, do you have an early favorite for what gets here? Somebody that, like, if these 2 guys make it, it's definitely one of those 2.
Well, back half of the draft, and the ADP dictates this, tends to be an elite quarterback. Now the decision is, do you take it at 1-5 or do you push it to the 2-2? And that, I guess that'll depend on exactly what gets to me. And then the second question we'll have to answer is, do we want to stack that quarterback right out of the gate? Again, there's a good chance we can get a Diggs, Allen, or a Hurts with one of his receivers, or do we want to, pass that chance up and get different that way? So
I did one draft earlier this morning and I was not planning to take one of the elite quarterbacks. I picked first. I took Travis Kelce, and then Jalen Hurts made it back to me at the 2-3 turn. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and take the guy that's been going in round 1 every time, and then we'll see where we go from there.
That's sweet. That's lucky you. I mean, that combo can't be owned very much at all.
And that's one of the reasons for doing a bunch of these drafts too. Obviously it gives you a better chance to win, but you have a better chance of seeing different things because people are going to be doing all sorts of different things. As usual, this one started with Christian McCaffrey and Travis Kelce going with the first 2 picks. So now we're at the 3rd spot. Jared's picking 5th. We'll start queuing up some players. Jamar Chase is up in that range as well. Stephon Diggs actually went 3rd in this particular draft. So Jared is now on the clock. Jamar Chase is a 4th pick. You got the 3 quarterbacks. What are we doing here?
So I'm going to push quarterbacks. I'll still have my choice of 2 on the way back. I'm going to take AJ Brown, who I think is, there's a tier break to me from Brown to the rest of these receivers. I mean, I think Lamb and Smith are close, but I'm going to take Brown. And then we can see if we got our buddy Pete Overzet picking 6th here. So we can see if he leaves me Jalen Hurts, and then we can decide if we want to, make that stack or not.
At least we know an experienced drafter is more likely to leave the stack for you because he's working on his own stacks as opposed to trying to stop yours. But, this is a different slate. So we'll see exactly what he plans to do here. We at least know he won't take 2 quarterbacks. So we'll have 2 of those 3 guys getting to you.
Yeah, here, like, I think it's viable for Pete to take Hurts and Saquon Barkley if he wanted, and make that little game stack, and he does. Takes
Yep.
Hurts at least.
Jalen Hurts goes the final pick of round one. One more pick for Peter Overzet, and then it's Jared's turn again. I think that Debo, CeeDee Lamb are a little bit closer than you were suggesting to AJ Brown this week. I think all those guys have plenty upside, and Debo and CeeDee Lamb are at least right with and maybe ahead of AJ Brown in target share upside.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Maybe not. Maybe Debo's not ahead, but similar at least. Devontae Smith, the stack with Jalen Hurts for Pete's team there.
Which makes sense. I mean, I think that's definitely lower owned than the Hurts Brown stack. I prefer Allen to Mahomes here.
Yeah.
Cool with that?
Oh, yeah. I would chase Josh Allen's ceiling this week.
I like the remaining Allen stack options better than the Mahomes stack options too, with Kelsey off the board.
Yeah, and I also think that Josh Allen is more. You're more capable of winning with Josh Allen without stacking than you are Patrick Mahomes, because he's more likely to do some rushing stuff than Mahomes is.
Yeah, we can definitely consider an unstacked Allen here. Maybe running it back with one of these Bengals guys. So I mean, this is how I do it when I do these. I'll go in now and I'll queue up, Bills and Bengals players just so I have them there.
Have you typically been looking at game stacks still this week? I mean, obviously we use it as a tiebreaker, but have you been, how focused on them have you been this week in your battle royale?
I mean,
draft
I'm focused on them because I think they make sense. The counter argument is they're popular. So I think by going Allen, Gabe Davis, Knox, no Bengals run back, I think that's a potential way to get different too.
Mm-hmm. Joe Mixon is a guy that scares me this week because the rushing has been volatile, for most of the season now. The receiving, he trailed Samaje Perine in pass snaps last week, didn't he?
That sounds familiar. I'd have to pull it up, but I think you're right. He out targeted him still, but
yeah, it was one of those where it was deceptive. I was like, okay, the targets were still there, and then I looked, and he ran maybe close to half the number of pass snaps versus Samaje Perine.
Yeah, Perine played more snaps in general, 31 to 26, and then Perine ran 22 routes to Mixon's 10.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that.
So Mixon's more of a fade for me this week, especially because I'm not sure he has huge game potential there. So we got Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, T. Higgins all still on the board, back to Jared's pick in round 3. Jerick McKinnon, Joe Mixon went right before your spot.
Yeah, I'm going to hope one of those receivers makes it back to me. Hope Pete doesn't take them both. I'm going to take the value on ETN here, and then potentially look to run him back with one of those cheaper Chiefs guys. Like I'll queue up Juju now as an option, not on my next pick, but at the next turn.
Interesting. I might have taken both of those receivers there and punted running back a little bit. ETN got there last week, even though they fell behind. But in general, he has downside risk in games where things go that way.
For sure, because the passing game usage still remains lower than I think it should be. But but I think as the clear guy, if he can get to 18 or 20 carries in this matchup, I think he could have a big game. But it's definitely worrisome, the potential game script for him.
Yeah, the other side of it last week is even though they fell behind by 27 points, he still had 12 carries in the second half of that game, 20 carries for the game. So they didn't go away from the run even when they were playing Chase.
Yeah, I think they ran more than the Chargers did, nursing their big lead.
So we got Dawson Knox still available as we move into round 5 here. Jared did take T. Higgins coming back in round 4. Tony Pollard just left the board. Joe Burrow left the board. We had Gabe Davis, Dallas Goedert go at the turn to Pete's team. So he's got an interesting one. Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Gabe Davis. I like that start for a team.
Me too. A little upset he took Goddard ahead of ADP like that.
Yeah, well, he had the quarterback.
That's right.
So, and that's a good nod to remember is don't adhere too much to ADP. You can use it in that somebody's very likely to make it back to me next time because he's like several rounds ahead. But if a guy is ahead by just like a few spots, don't count on it being that close, especially in a week like this.
Yep, that's fair.
So, round 5 coming up to Jared. What are you looking at here?
Oh, there goes Juju. I wanted him. Okay. So Pete needs a running back, which I'm unlikely to go running back here. Doesn't need a tight end. He could. I'm gonna take Knox. I think. What do you think? Kittle's still there.
Yep.
I'm taking Kittle. Right.
Do it. You can even take Knox.
I could take Knox. I could take Knox, or we could go unstacked Josh Allen. I think the Kittle value there is too good to pass up.
Yeah. And I think since you're looking at, wide receivers with definite like basement potential beyond this, I personally like the double tight end, but I want to hear what you want.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way. I mean, for me, it's either look at Pete, by the way, with Quez Watkins making that a triple stack.
I think that's too far.
Yeah, me too. Maybe Watkins is like your first Eagle stack or second. I'm gonna take Knox here. I'm with you. I don't like the receivers or running backs enough.
Yeah.
So we got the Allen Knox stack with Higgins run back, which I think that's a pretty solid way to get different with that team, right? Not having Diggs or Gabe with Allen. Then we just have ETN, AJ Brown, and Kittle with no game stacks there. It's okay.
Yes, you just need George Kittle to not be the left out guy like he was last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Then Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox did catch 2 touchdowns last week. One got negated by a penalty. So all you need is for that to count. Believe me, I know, because I had him in a battle royale last week in a 2 tight end lineup that I was like, ooh, this is starting to look good. And then that one got called back. I think the Quez Watkins, before we get to just looking at your team, I think the Quez Watkins pick is worth discussing, because when you're doing like full season best ball, that's a good guy to throw in there at the end of a Jalen Hurts team. I think it's an example of overthinking in this case. He had 2 games all season where he reached 40 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns all season. Quez Watkins is most likely to give you 1 to 2 catches. So you absolutely need a huge play or a red zone target, which he doesn't get a lot of them. And I think that you could stick somebody else in there that's not as, weird. You don't have to get so weird with that pick.
Yeah, and if you're looking at his box scores for the season, most of his productive games were when Goddard was out, and his playing time did spike over that span. So, if that was the case, I think he'd be in play. And I'm sure if we asked Pete, he'd say he's, trying to get that 5% owned guy that no one else has, which I think is a viable strategy. My issue with it is just the fact that he took 3 Eagles pass catchers, especially with a quarterback like Hurts, who's also going to do some stuff with his legs. I'm just not sure 3 Eagles pass catchers can get in the winning lineup, even if it's like Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. I mean, that's obviously a better shot than having Quez be the 3rd guy in there, but I'm not even sure all 3 of those guys can do enough to be in the lineup that wins this thing.
Yeah. Now I will say that's a lineup that you make if you're drafting 100 of them. If you're drafting 20, I wouldn't, take a player like that.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So let's look at your team now. You talked about some of it. I like the double tight ends. I like having Josh Allen in there. What do you got?
Yeah. I'm not sure how I drafted. I can actually look right now. I'm not sure I drafted a single Kittle before that. I don't think. Yeah, that's not. I had 1 Kittle before that. So I'm happy to have gotten him there. And I think again that's another way to get different teams is taking advantage of fallers, because Kittle, where he is in ADP, won't be paired with these other guys just because in most drafts it's not possible to get them together. And I think it was kind of the same case with ETN, who I got. Like 4 or 5 picks past ADP. So, me, I love my correlation, and this lineup isn't super correlated, but I like it. It's definitely. I think it's different enough to have a chance to win this if everything falls right.
Yeah, and you probably don't want to be super correlated on this slate unless you think there's one game that's just going to score way more points than any other.
Right. Yep.
All right, so let's switch over now. We did a draft with Jared. We're going to do a draft for me now. I've got the ADP screen up as we switch, but I'm going to go in and go ahead and join one. I did draft 2 this morning. I did take 2 tight ends in at least one of them. I can't honestly remember what I did in the other, so maybe I'll check it out while we're waiting for this one to fill, which of course usually takes about 40 seconds.
Matt's a dark mode guy, I see.
Oh yeah. we got the light side with Jared. We went to the dark side with me.
I think
My
I'm the
eyes
weird.
are older.
I'm the weirdo. I think most people prefer the black.
Posting anything with light mode on Twitter is definitely a sure way at this point to get people yelling at you for using light mode. So I'm picking 2 in this draft. So automatically we're going to get something different than what we saw in Jared's draft. I'm going to guess we see McCaffrey go first and that Travis Kelce's still on the board for me, but we'll see here.
Is McCaffrey year 1 and Kelce year 2?
I think that I would go 50-50 between them from the top spot because I still think that Kelce has at least as much monster potential as anybody else at any position on the slate.
Yeah, that's fair. The reason I lean McCaffrey is just because I think tight end is so strong in general. So it hurts Kelce's relative value a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly also fair. I think that one other thing that pushes me away from McCaffrey a little bit is I'm not going to be a high volume drafter. So I have to find ways to get different. And if I'm doing that, having less McCaffrey is going to be a way for me to get a little bit different. I can wait on running back and mix it up with guys that are getting drafted less. Plus, taking Kelce early makes it easier for me to get 2 of those tight ends. Like I said, that's a build I like this week.
Kelce sets you up for a Lawrence team too. I think a lot of my Kelce teams have ended up being Lawrence stacks.
Yeah, to me, Kelce just works in any way, of a number of ways.
Yep.
So we'll see what this team does to start things out. Oh, they took Kelce, so I'll just go ahead and take a McCaffrey here because I didn't in either of my first 2 drafts, and then we'll see where we go from there. So I'm not gonna do a whole lot with that as far as correlation goes. I certainly still could add Cowboys or 49ers, but there's nothing that's going to change for me because I have McCaffrey on that front. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. Lamb does kind of fall into place on McCaffrey teams often if you do want to make that game stack. And again, I think Lamb at ADP is a fine pick, so it's not like you're reaching for it. But yeah, I don't think you should necessarily change your plan just because you landed McCaffrey in the first.
And the other thing about Lamb being such an easy fit there is I'm sure that there are plenty of McCaffrey Lamb teams already.
Yes.
So I'm going to need to find a way to get that different. Maybe it's Lamb and Debo if both of those guys are there. So we'll certainly look at that based on who does make it back to me. The 2 quarterbacks went in the first round this time. We had Mahomes go 3rd. We had Jalen Hurts go 6th. Stephon Diggs is gone. Saquon Barkley went in the first round. A.J. Brown, the team at the end of round 1 stacked Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Then we had Jamar Chase.
Yeah, and then Josh Allen went to the Diggs teams. That's what I'm saying again. Those Hurts, Brown, and Allen Diggs especially are just going to be super high owned in this contest.
So I think I am going to go ahead and take Lamb here and see if Debo makes it around the other side and then maybe do that as a way to get different on McCaffrey.
And would that then make this a Brock Purdy team?
I don't know. I mean, there's just so much at quarterback this week. I'm not sure that Purdy gives me that ceiling with guys that can get there on yardage and score, once each. Like if we get 150 total yards from McCaffrey and 1 touchdown and 120 total yards from Debo and 1 touchdown, like we could just have an okay day for Purdy.
Well, McCaffrey can do it on the ground, obviously, but so can Debo.
Right.
So, they could both have big days without a big passing game.
And it could also be a Dak team because he's not going that far differently from Brock Purdy. And I think he's actually behind Brock Purdy in ADP. So I think it's more likely to be a Dak team, especially because his team is going to need him more, I think, than San Francisco will need Purdy.
I like it.
So that's there. We had Travis Etienne go in the middle of round 3 following Jerick McKinnon after my Debo pick. So I did put CeeDee Lamb and Debo Samuel on the McCaffrey team. We had Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon stacked together at the turn from the team that, what did they do the first time around?
It's a Kelce.
That's right. Okay.
Yep.
Started with Kelce, then took Burrow and Joe Mixon. That's an interesting stack. That's another one of those I think makes more sense on the small slate and would be something you might want to avoid a little bit more. Although we talked about it, Mixon is kind of a better bet for receiving than he is for rushing these days.
Yeah, I think Burrow Mixon makes sense in general. I mean, it's not the first stack I'd pick in a vacuum from the Bengals, but I think it's different. I haven't seen many Burrow Mixon teams, so I think that's the biggest argument in favor of it.
We got Miles Sanders coming up. We have Dallas Goedert still on the board. That might be my pick.
I mean, George Kittle's there.
Yeah, I don't want to be crazy on 49ers.
No? All right. I mean,
I'm going Dallas Goedert here.
Okay. No arguments here.
Especially with what is he, the third or fourth tight end off the board? There
Yeah,
we
right
go.
there.
I'm not experienced enough in these drafts to know exactly what all the buttons do, but he's the fourth
Fourth.
tight end off the board. You talked about him on the DFS show. You said he's your second favorite tight end this week.
Yeah, he is, for tournaments. Schultz, by the way, is the fade for me at tight end. He's really the only guy among those top 6 that I don't like, and I don't think I've drafted a single time. I know he's coming off the big game, which I like. I'll let you talk through your pick here.
This is going to be Dak for me because I think he makes the most sense with what I have, and there's no argument for the other quarterbacks having more upside. And then I'll just see what gets to me at the 6th round.
Yep. Yeah, with the Schultz, the Niners are one of the best tight end defenses in the NFL. They have been for the past few years. That's continued this year, whether you look at adjusted points allowed or Football Outsiders metrics. So to me, Schultz is just an easy fade.
Yes, I agree. And especially after last week, he's going to have people more excited about him than usual because he put up the big points on the Bucs.
Yep, exactly.
So this can be kind of anything for me, like whatever makes it. And it's the kind of thing where if I have the same pick every time, it's not going to be the same player. So guys I'm looking at, Juju is still on the board. Isaiah Hodgins is still around. Dawson Knox for that double tight end look. And I'm looking more for, I don't know, just somebody that has an upside path as opposed to somebody that's correlated necessarily here.
Yep. Yeah, Juju would have been my favorite because I think he has the highest ceiling. Hodgins would have given you queue up Richie James just to make me happy.
I'm going to have a tough time doing Richie James over Michael Gallup, though, since I have Dak as my quarterback.
Yeah, I like that. And you just kind of be all in on that Cowboys-Niners game in this lineup, which I like.
And I said I wasn't correlating, but, I'm not. If I'm breaking a tie between Michael Gallup and, say, Richie James and Kadarius Toney and James Cook and Hayden Hurst, that's where I think it makes sense to go ahead and take the guy who would match up with my quarterback.
Yep, I like Gallup here.
All right, so Gallup is the final pick. That team is built. That's 3 so far. I'm sure I'm going to do more than I should, Jared, and just donate money to whoever takes this tournament.
You got 27 hours left to draft. You can get a lot of these in 27 hours.
Oh my God, yeah. I think I've gotten there was 1 week where there was going to be overlay, and I was drafting them 3 at a time before kickoff, and it didn't end up doing anything great for me.
Yeah, I'm a 1 draft at a time guy. I can't do the multi drafts.
If I have a choice, I'm 1 draft at a time as well. But if I'm trying to get, as many as I can in a time frame, I have at least gotten to the point where I can comfortably do 2 at the same time. 3 can get a bit crazy.
These go so fast too. I mean, would that take 4 minutes? I mean, you could get a lot of these in even just going 1 at a time.
That's right. So yeah, that's 1 team. I got a Kelsey team earlier with a Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders stack, which is on the screen right now. There was 1 more. Jamar Chase was a first-round pick. What were you gonna say?
I would say I like this one. So you must have gotten Chase near the end of the first round, and then came back and got Allen. Yep. I haven't seen many Allen Chase combos. So, and you got Gabe, Cook, Ingram. Yeah, I like that team.
Got my 2 tight ends if you wanted.
You should do more of these, Matt. I like how your teams look.
Yeah, I always end up with teams that I like how they look, and then the money doesn't like them as much. That's what's diving in head first.
All right.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this draft show, and it's going to be our final DFS draft show of the season, right?
Sadly, yeah. Talk to you in 8 months.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be 8 months, though, because we're going to have best ball drafts coming up very soon. And of course, if you're not already on Underdog, you can click the link at the bottom of this podcast, wherever you're getting it, or you can put in promo code DraftSharks. You can get your deposit matched up to $100. You can get free money to play with. You can get the same thing on Sleeper. They don't have their drafts going anymore, but they still have over-unders. I believe that they just shared they have a special on Saquon Barkley available rushing yards. So you can jump in and play that one, and it's a half a rushing yard. So even if he has a rough game against the Eagles, I think he's probably beating that one, Jared.
I hope so. Yeah. And I think it's our goal to have our 2023 projections up by the end of February. So if you can hold off on entering those early best balls for another month or so, I think having the full projections, I think I mentioned in the past, my best ball teams this year were ones I drafted early, because I just think there's an edge if you do sit down and project out every team.
Yes, the tournament that I was running first in until week 18, until week 17, and didn't get Stephon Diggs in the final game. But my best finish was in one of those as well. So I agree. There's definitely an edge in those. And even if you can't wait for the projections to be posted, you'll find me in the draft room. So it'll be that time before we know it.
For sure.
For Jared Small and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.